Today we come to the book of Daniel. It's a very strange book in the sense that it's a very familiar book. Every Sunday school kid knows Daniel and the lion's den and the stories. And yet, it's a very unfamiliar book because the prophecies in the second part of Daniel baffle Christians. Right? So in one sense, easy book. In another sense, almost totally impossible to understand without spiritual understanding. Okay? Now, the first part of the book of Daniel is about his life, about Daniel. The second part is about his visions or dreams, right, which are prophetic. Now, this book is often said to be the key to biblical prophecy. You know some of the principles, it will help you understand prophecy. Now, this book is written in two languages. Only two books in the Bible are written in two languages, Ezra and Daniel. The two languages are Aramaic and Hebrew. Right? In these two books, there are two languages. What is Aramaic? Aramaic is the common language of that region, that whole area. Can we say the global language in those days in that part of the world? Aramaic is a cousin, linguistically speaking, with Hebrew, right? But it's a different language. And so, in the first part, chapter 1 of this book of Daniel, written in Hebrew, and then chapter 8 to 12, the last part, the visions part, the hard to understand part, Hebrew again. The easy part, the stories, chapter 2 to chapter 7, written in Aramaic. What's the purpose? I don't know. Maybe the Aramaic part, let the public read it. The people in those days wanted to read what Daniel wrote, and the Aramaic part they would understand because there was no translated Bible. So they saw the Aramaic part. Oh, it's very interesting. Daniel's life, amazing, right? But the prophecy part is in Hebrew, and so the non-Hebrews could not read it, which is good because, I mean, honestly, you couldn't understand it if you were not a child of God, and you could care less anyway, right? So please don't ask a non-believer to read the prophecy part of Daniel. You just totally confuse him. Now, before we go into the nit and grit and confuse ourselves, let's see the big theme of the book of Daniel. The big theme is kingdoms. God allows kingdoms to rise and to fall. Ultimately, all right, every kingdom goes through the same cycle. God allows it to rise. When men have power, they have pride. When they have pride, they become cruel, they become corrupt, and they cause misery to their people, and then God brings them down and brings another one up. Okay, we study in Chinese history the dynasties. They start pretty well. Then after a while, they go into that cycle of corruption and power and cruelty and etc. And then God brings them down. So basically the theme is ultimately all human kingdoms are going to fail us. But ultimately, in the end of time, whenever that will be, there will be one kingdom, God's kingdom. That's what this book's all about. All right, so many kingdoms here. You see every dream is about different kingdoms coming up, rising, right? And now one replaces it. And then at the end of it all, one kingdom is going to come up. And that's God's kingdom, bringing not pain, but peace, right? So I hope that you see the big picture. And if anytime you lose the big picture, you lose it all. And you see God ultimately has a plan for us, that we will live in the ultimate kingdom of God. Be patient, right? Now, basically, there are certain sub-themes, I would say, okay? Sub-themes. The big theme is that. The sub-theme is there are 3 stories of faithfulness. In chapter 1, how Daniel and his 3 friends refused to eat the food of the pagans, right? Then in chapter 3, the 3 friends of Daniel refused to bow to the idol. And then lastly, chapter 6, Daniel himself refuses to pray to the king. So you see 3 stories of faithfulness of God's people, and then the 3 stories end up in them suffering, but ultimately being blessed for their faithfulness. All right, so that's a sub-theme. Faithfulness leads to some suffering, but ultimately blessing. Okay, so that's one of the sub-themes. There is a second sub-theme. It shows that suffering comes because of super arrogant kings, right? And then we see that in chapter 4 and chapter 5, when Nebuchadnezzar thinks that he's like God, right? See, when you get power, that's what you think. And then God has to bring him down. And then chapter 5 shows his son, Belshazzar, drinking from the holy vessels of God's temple in an orgy. Who does he think he is, right? Using God's vessels for an orgy. God hammers them down. Okay? Well, Nebuchadnezzar becomes a beast, like an animal for 7 years. Mental problem. His son gets killed that very night. He fools around with God's holy vessels, right? So what is it? Sub-theme. Sub-theme is these kings, after a while, think they're like gods. They become like beasts, right? Instead of subjecting to God, they want to be gods. Sub-theme, huh? What other sub-theme? It shows us that another sub-theme is the visions. The visions show that ultimately there will come a kingdom. Ultimately. At the end of time, there will be a kingdom. And that will be eternal kingdom. Amazing one. Okay? Sub-theme again. Enduring kingdom. Everlasting kingdom. Okay? So these are the 3 sub-themes in the big theme. Okay? Now, let's look at Daniel. Who was Daniel? Daniel was a teenager probably when the Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, conquered Jerusalem, hadn't burned it yet, and he took out the royal, the elite of Jerusalem. And Daniel, being of the royal line, all the princes, there are many, kings had a lot of wives and a lot of princes, and the princes were taken out, right, to Babylon. And Daniel, all right, was in Babylon, and God blessed him, and he served under 4 kings. That's amazing. 2 Babylonian kings, Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, and 2 Medo-Persian kings, or we just say Persian, all right? Medo-Persian kings, right? Darius and Cyrus. So he served under 4 kings, 2 different, shall we say, empires. Okay? Quite unusual, very, very rare. And he was not serving, he was a super civil servant. He was like PM level, Prime Minister level. Okay? So that was Daniel. Now let's look at chapter 1. In chapter 1, it tells us that the Babylonian king brought out these hostages, this royal line, and one of the purposes of the Babylonian king was to train an elite civil service because he had to rule an empire. So he wanted the best brains, very much like Singapore. We have scholarships to get all the best and brightest to Singapore. Of course, we don't capture them or kidnap them. We entice them with scholarships. Right? In those days, they used a different method of getting what we call good brains, good manpower. So they get the best and brightest from different places, hostages, and then they are brought into the king's court and they are selected like interview, like a scholarship interview. And then Daniel and his three friends, okay, all royal line, royalty, or probably teenagers. That's the best time to indoctrinate. And like in Singapore, we give scholarships to teenagers, usually in secondary school, so their brain becomes Singaporean, and one day, hopefully, they stay in Singapore and increase or give us a better genetic pool of bright people, right? So same thing, same old, any wise ruler would do that, okay? And one of the first things they did to Daniel and his friends was to change their names, okay? You'll find the name Daniel, it ends with L, that's God. Mishael, another guy there, all right? L. And two of them ended with Yah, right? Hananiah, right? Azariah, right? That is Jehovah, okay? Jehovah. So basically, they changed their names from the names of their gods to the name of Babylonian gods. So they had new names. Daniel became Belteshazzar, which is the name of a Babylonian god. And all the others, also Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are all names of Babylonian gods. So the idea was to give them a new identity. Their loyalty now is to Babylon. Now, they never protested that. What's in the name anyway? You can call me anything you like. That's your choice, right? But when they were put into the college, all right, or this elite school to be trained, one of their things was their diet. They wanted them to look impressive, big and strong guys, so they would get lots of meat and the best, finest food. But being Jews, they couldn't eat food that was not kosher, was not killed according to Jewish law. The blood had to be shed and killed. Animals had to be killed in a certain way, and only certain animals could not be eaten too. But when they were offered the food, they said, no, we cannot eat this food. See, the names they didn't bother, but the food, they said, no, we can't eat this food. So they negotiated with the chief, the one in charge of their training, all right, maybe we call him the dorm supervisor, and they said, can we eat our own food? We can't eat the meat because it's not killed according to our laws. And can we just eat veg? At least that's safe, right? So they wanted to eat beans. And so the dorm supervisor is a bit nervous. He said, now, if I allow you to do that, you look skinny and scrawny. Now, how are you going to stand before the king? I'm in deep trouble. All right? Not only must you be trained mentally, culturally, but look good, right? But they negotiated and said, give us 10 days. Well, that's a very short time. I mean, that's almost like a miracle. And 10 days, you decide whether we look better than the other guys. I mean, how do you change your looks in 10 days? Ask any guy that goes to a gym and that's not possible, right? But after 10 days, the guy comes back and says, my goodness, you guys look better, all right? Basically, they wanted them to be fleshy, right? All cultures, you know, we are the new culture that wants to be skinny. All cultures love to be pudgy, all right? Show that you're prosperous, okay? So it worked out, okay? And you know what? At the end of it, it's like the end of their, course. They went for interview with the king, and, they were found to be 10 times better than all the rest. Imagine that you ace your exam, all right? Your civil service examination, and you go into the elite administrative service. What is this lesson there? They were willing to make a stand for God, thinking that it will maybe cost them. They kicked out of the school, but on the other hand, they became the top students. So be faithful in little things. They purpose in their heart. It says, Daniel purpose in his heart that I will do right. When you have a choice, do right and be faithful to stand in little things. One day, he can stand before the lions, all right? Now, second chapter is a different thing altogether. Now they're all in the civil service, elite civil service. And one day, Nebuchadnezzar has a crazy night. He cannot sleep. He had a horrible dream. He wakes up and forgot his dream. That's quite common, right? And so he tells, he's very troubled that he needs to know this dream because it's definitely something that troubled him. And in his mind, something very important. So what he does is he calls all his wise men. You see, the civil service are always the best and brightest, all right? And he calls them and said, hey, I want you guys to tell me my dream and the interpretation. And all the wise guys freak out and say, what are you talking about? It's impossible. No king has ever asked this. You tell us your dream and then we can interpret your dream. And Nebuchadnezzar, he's like Hitler, he's a monster. He says, no, you're just buying time because I can't remember it. And if you ask me to tell you the dream, I can't tell you, so you're safe. No, you don't tell me my dream and I kill all of you. All of you. The whole civil service wiped out. Wow, okay. So when the executioner had to give the news, including to Daniel and his guys, Daniel said, what's happening? And he was told that the king's gone mad. The king's going to kill all of you because if you can't tell his dream, all the wise men, the entire civil service, the elite would be killed because you're all useless. No good to me. And Daniel said, wait, hold it. Let me pray. So he calls his three buddies and they have a prayer meeting and they pray. And you know what? God shows him the dream and the interpretation. So he says, let me go and see the king. And he stands before the king and he says, the God of heaven has told me this. This is your dream. And what was the dream? It was about a massive statue, right? And of course, Nebuchadnezzar said, exactly, that's my dream. What does it mean? And it meant the statue was a head of gold. The breast, chest, arms, silver. The belly and the thighs, brass. The legs, the lower legs, iron. Reaches down to the toes. It's no more iron, it's iron and clay mixed up. What in the world is this statue? Right? Massive statue. And Daniel says, this are the kingdoms that will come. Right? The head of gold is you. See, Babylon was a glorious empire. Very gorgeous, the hanging gardens of Babylon. Babylon was like, whoa, it's by the beautiful rivers and everything was perfect. Glorious, that's the word. Gold is glorious, impressive. The second would be chest, 2 arms, right? That would be the Medo-Persian Empire. M-E-D-O, okay? Now we forget who are the Medes. The Medes, they were M-E-D-E-S, right? The second empire is the Medo-Persian Empire. It's good, but it's not as glorious as yours, silver. The third empire, no great glorious place, but very powerful. Greek, Alexander the Great. He never built any great cities or like Babylon or anything like that, but he conquered a lot, right? And then the last one of iron, the Romans. Okay? So this is basically told, I'm interpreting it for you, all right? Because later we will see the interpretation, not in chapter 2, right? It just told that you are the gold, followed will be the silver, blah, blah, blah. And finally, the last one would be many little toes and fragmented. That's the Roman Empire at the end. And Nebuchadnezzar is so impressed, all right? He says, wow. And he elevates Daniel to be the prime minister, basically, effectively, all right? And, of course, Daniel then asks his friends to help him to rule, okay, in the province of Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, your God, he must be the God of gods. Okay? Now, what's actually Daniel saying? He says, your kingdom will be smashed down one day. That's basically what he's saying. And the Medes think they're big, the Greeks will smash. Basically, the theme is the same. Kingdoms come, kingdoms will go. Don't be too arrogant. Don't be too impressed. If you're the king, don't be arrogant. If you're a subject, don't be too impressed. All right? Or depressed. Depends on which way you look at it. Okay? So, that was how he was elevated from elite service to PM level, all right? Prime Minister level. Lesson, chapter 3. Now the king gets so egoistic, or instead of thinking it, that, my goodness, one day the Medo-Persians will wipe us out. He's the head of gold. He only focuses on the gold part. And then he gets so excited, he builds a golden statue, all right? 90 feet tall, all right? Puts it on the plane so that it stands out really high. And then he makes a decree that whenever the national anthem is played, or whatever anthem, I mean some song is played, everybody's got to bow to this golden idol, which is basically him, right? Now, of course, Daniel's 3 friends, who are top civil servants now, refuse to bow. And there is a decree that if anybody doesn't bow, he will be burned in a furnace of fire. So the 3 refuse to bow, and then what happens is they are thrown into the furnace of fire. Now the king says he's so angry that some people don't bow towards him. You see, this is the arrogance of people when they have power. I don't even know what's so good about people bowing to you, but it's something weird that happens to people when they have power. They want everybody to serve them. And so he throws this, he takes, make the fire 7 times hotter. This is stupid. I mean, you want to torture someone, make the fire slow, right? 7 times you kill him straight away. There's no torture. It shows idiots become kings, right? And so he throws them in the fire, but he realizes they're not dead. In fact, he somehow peeps through the door of the furnace, and he sees they're walking around, and there's not 3 of them, there's 4 of them walking in the fire. It's ridiculous. And one of them, he says, looks like the Son of God. So it must be some angelic being. Some says maybe the pre-incarnate Christ. And then he calls them out, and they come out. They don't even smell of smoke. Not you guys smoke cigarette, you can smell smoke. In the furnace, they don't smell smoke. And he comes out and says, my goodness, your God must be the God. Idiot. You already said Daniel's God is the God of gods. You idiot. Don't you know that these guys worship the same God? All right? What's wrong with you? Are you thick in your head? He was, obviously. All right? When you're proud, you get thick. You get stupid. All right? And so he acknowledges that, oh my goodness, these guys, gods, are the real gods. At least for a while he acknowledges that. Okay? Then in chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream one night. This time he remembers the dream, okay? The dream is about a huge tree that reaches up to the heavens, and under that tree are all the birds and the animals take their shade and get their food from this massive, massive tree, right? And then suddenly there is a voice that smashes down the tree, okay? And what is this? Okay? And the tree is smashed down and left a stump. And the stump. And then the voice says, you will be a beast for 7 years. Right? Now, he's troubled. He doesn't know what all this is. So he calls all his wise men again, and they cannot come up with an interpretation. Finally, Daniel pops up and interprets the dream for him. Of course, Daniel is very embarrassed to tell him, hey, king, this big tree is you. God bless you. All the kingdoms, empires are under you. And you have the rule over them. They need you. They're under you. But one day, God is going to make you nothing, just a stump. What do you mean by that? You will be a beast for 7 years. You will be like an animal, behave like an animal for 7 years. But strangely enough, your kingdom will not be gone. It'll still be there. And after 7 years, when you get back your mind, the kingdom will still be there. The stump is still there, and the tree can still grow. Oh, okay. And so, of course, you think the king will be mad. You said, I'm going to be an animal? But the king is so impressed that he actually praises Daniel, right? And says, wow, you're amazing, all right, that you can interpret this dream. Now, what is God doing to this arrogant, terrible man? God's giving him another chance, for goodness sake. All right, first time he realizes Daniel's God's the real God. Then the three men's God's the real God. And now he is not God. He's just a mere man who can be reduced to a beast like that. And one stroke from God, the God that he acknowledged earlier. You know what? The thick brain of his, so proud, cannot digest it. Cannot figure it. You tell a proud man his problems, I don't think he gets it. Right? He's so full of himself, we use that word, that nothing else can get in. Okay? So what happens is, after a while, one day, he goes up to the palace. After this, 1 year later, he looks around and said, look at my empire. I built it. I built this whole thing by my power, for my honor, and for my glory. Wow, okay? And then that very moment, he goes crazy. You know how mental you can get, mentally deranged through one event, and he behaves like an animal. It's so embarrassing. So they had the courtiers or whatever, his sons had to put him aside, and he lived with the animals. All right, let me give you a little background story, and this is probably true. Nebuchadnezzar, this is historical, married a beautiful girl from Tehran, Persia. Tehran, if you know today, is surrounded by mountains. Beautiful place. All right. Babylon's flat. And so this beautiful queen he married missed her hometown so much, the mountains. And so the king wanted to impress his bride, and he said, I'll make you a mountain. So he filled the plains of Babylon and literally made a beautiful mountain-like structure. It became one of the 7 wonders of the world, called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. In the old days, there were 7 wonders of the world. This is one of them. People came to look, it's like, whoa, this is amazing. A man-made mountain with beautiful trees and everything planted. And she also missed the animals that used to roam in the mountains in her own old home of Tehran. And so he made a zoo up there full of animals for her, so that she could look at from the palace, look at this beautiful thing and remind herself of her home. And the story is probably that Nebuchadnezzar ended up in that zoo up there with the animals, right, for 7 years. Says his fingernails grew like birds' claws. That's possible. If he recluses, the fingernails grow really long after a while. Their hair gets shaggy, and he became deranged. But after 7 years, when he acknowledged, I don't know how, that he is not God, there is a God in heaven. And then he was mentally normal again and became king again. Wow, all right. This is so bizarre, that you just can't get it. All right. In fact, I like one part that Daniel said to him, right, when he interpreted the dream. Let me read to you Daniel chapter 4, verse 17. It's almost when he's interpreting to the king. Imagine a man telling the king, Daniel 4, verse 17. Let me see that. Yeah. This is Daniel telling him, but before he became an animal. The sentence is by decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliest of men. How do you like that? How do you like your civil servant to tell the emperor, right? Let me tell you, this tree, God's going to chop it down. And the tree is you. And the reason is, God wants you to know that it is God that allows you to be where you are. He sets you up. And you know who he usually chooses? The lowliest of men. I think the thick numbskull of this guy, full of pride, never got it. Right? But when I read it, I was amused. Right? He is walking around strutting his thing like, I'm so smart, I conquered all this. And God said, you know what? I put idiots up there. Right? I don't know why people want power. It's the worst place to be. Right? I don't get it, But anyway, a lot of people fight for power. Right? Okay, so story number 1. He's humble. And he dies. Nebuchadnezzar dies. His son, Belshazzar, not Belteshazzar, Belshazzar. Belteshazzar is Daniel. Belshazzar must be all the gods have that name, something like that. Becomes the next king. And he's going to celebrate. It's an orgy. Wine is drink, and he needs beautiful cups for his beautiful wine. And he calls, get up the golden cups from where my father took out of the of the holy temple in Jerusalem. Those beautiful cups for serving God. And they drink, have the orgy out of the cups. And that very night, a finger, dismembered, just a finger. Imagine just one finger running around, writing on the wall the words. The writing is on the wall, right? Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. What does that mean? He can read it, but he can't understand it, right? And he freaks out. He's trembling. And all the people, can you imagine a dismembered finger right before your eyes? One little finger, maybe index finger, writing on the wall. My goodness, anybody's hair would stand on ends. I would tremble too. And he calls for all the wise men. And finally they call for Daniel. Daniel says, you know what that means? You have been measured, assessed by God, and weighed in the balance and found unworthy to be king. And so your kingdom will be taken away. I'm paraphrasing. And you know what? That very night, I'm sure after that they stopped drinking, because even if they were, high, they will be low after that, seeing that dismembered finger. And that very night, Darius, the Medo-Persian conqueror, came into the fortress of Babylon, almost unconquerable, took over that very night, killed Belshazzar, and that was the end of the Babylonian Empire. Wow, just like that. Okay? Really, God puts you and God takes you down. Okay? And that was chapter 5. Okay. Now, Darius likes Daniel. So Darius made Daniel the chief of his ministers, prime minister. Okay. And of course, the others are very jealous. I mean, he used to serve the Babylonians. Now the Persians come in and they still choose this guy. Doesn't make sense. He's an old man at this time, probably in his 80s. And of course, the younger guys don't like that. This guy is we will never get our promotion, right? There's no retirement age. You know what? Civil service always a retirement age, so the young Turks get their chance, right? So they have to fix this guy so they can get promoted. So they plan to tell the new king, right, that, let's test the loyalty of all our people. Make a decree that nobody is to seek the help of any other authority, God, power, whatever, except you. In other words, prove their loyalty is to you, not some other outside power. They knew that's the only way they could fix Daniel because he's incorruptible. So the best way to fix him, very simple. They knew he would pray because he was a public prayer. Every day, 3 times a day, he would go up to his room, windows wide open, pray towards Jerusalem. Public. He never denied his faith and his God. And when the decree was made, he did it again. Stood towards Jerusalem and prayed to his God. And they reported him. And the king said, try to get out of this, because the decree was if anyone within the 30 days sought help from any other, he should be thrown into a lion's den. Obviously, the Medo-Persian way of killing was different from the normal furnace den of hungry lions. And so he wants to pull out, make an excuse for Daniel, because he liked Daniel, he trusted Daniel, but can't. He made the decree. And so they throw him into the lion's den. And the king that night was so troubled, couldn't sleep. Wakes up early in the morning, rushes to the lion's den, and somehow he senses the God of Daniel was saying, Daniel, are you there? And Daniel said, yeah, I'm here. I'm fine. Wow. And they open the door, and Daniel comes out. Totally protected. Some people say the lions were well fed, that's why they didn't eat him. I like the story, you see. The chapter 6 doesn't let the story end there. The king now was so angry with those who plotted to fix Daniel that he got all of them arrested, including their families, and threw them into the lion's den. And the story says the lions had a good meal that day with those guys. So obviously they were hungry, right? But God protected Daniel. Okay, now, many people, Sunday school stories show Daniel was strapping men standing in the lion's den. That's a misrepresentation. Daniel was like 80 years old at this time. He had served Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, he's not a young guy, right? You count the years, he's not young. Anyway, that is the story of the easy part of the book of Daniel. All right, we'll take a break here because the prophecy part is going to be a lot different. The mood is going to be very different. But what have we learned thus far? All right, the theme. God tells Nebuchadnezzar, kings, empires who come and go, don't be egoistical, be humble. But he can't. He can't. All right? Belshazzar can't. All right? They feel proud. And basically, don't worry, relax. We live under terrible kingdoms now. But in 70 years, you live under a bad king. It's okay. Relax. One day, the God who can pull down Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, one day that God will come, set up an eternal kingdom. You live forever there, right? Okay, so that is basically the theme of the book of Daniel. Not so much, oh, how many years. Later we see prophecy, people will argue about how many days and all that. I don't think, all right, because if good men keep differing, then maybe it's wise that we learn the principles of the book of the Bible, the big picture, right? Let's take a break now before we go on to the prophetic part. We now come to the second part of Daniel, the prophetic part of Daniel, from chapter 7 onwards. Before we enter this, let me just say a few things about prophecy. Now, when the Old Testament prophets spoke of the kingdom coming, they did not realize that the king would come twice. None of the Old Testament prophets grasped that. They knew the king would come. You and I know today, all Christians should know the king comes twice. Jesus came first time 2,000 years ago as a suffering king. And he will come again as a conquering king. We don't know when. But the gap between the first and the second is 2,000 years at least. Because we live in this valley, this big valley of 2,000 years since his first coming. So we have this grasp, we have this understanding. The king comes twice. So there are two kingdoms, right? They didn't. So when they say the kingdom comes, you're not sure which one they are referring to, because they also don't know which one they're referring to. They just see a kingdom coming, right? And they don't realize that's twice. Okay? Now today I live in a kingdom, a divine kingdom. I'm a citizen of heaven. I have a king, his name is Christ. But I also live in an earthly kingdom. I live in Singapore. And I'm a citizen of Singapore, proudly so. So I live in a coexistence of a divine kingdom that has come 2,000 years already. But this divine kingdom has coexisted with earthly kingdoms. Now, did the prophets know that? The answer is no. They thought when the kingdom comes, all the earthly kingdoms are gone. They didn't realize there will be a long period of coexistence. How long? I don't know. All right. Many scholars would say, oh, Daniel says so many years, and they all disagree. All right. So I hope you get this clear, because this is very important. Right. Now let's go to chapter 7. Now Daniel has a problem. Before, the king had two dreams and he was troubled. And Daniel can interpret his dreams. Now Daniel has a dream and he can't even interpret his own dream. Because the point is, God doesn't give him. Daniel has no ability to interpret dreams. It's God that gives him the ability. But now that he has a dream, he's troubled. And in his dream, he sees 4 beasts coming out of the sea. A lion with wings, a monstrous looking bear, a leopard with angel's wings, and then finally a monster he can hardly describe. So frightening. But this monster has lots of horns and one very special horn. All right? Now, honestly, you have so many interpretations who the lion is, who the bear is, who the leopard is. I don't know, and I don't care. All right? But I am concerned about the 4th beast, this monstrous beast, which has horns. Why am I concerned? Because one of these horns, of his many horns, does something that concerns us, right? This one in Daniel 7 verse 25, or maybe verse 24, let me read it. As for the Daniel 7:24, as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise. So the fourth kingdom, this monster king beast that comes out, 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and he shall put down 3 kings. Well, it's a very confusing. What it means, I don't even know. Verse 25, he shall speak words against the Most High, that's God, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, that's us, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. All right? Whoever this one is, he is a guy who is not afraid to speak against God, right? To trouble the people of God, and he will be there for a time, times, and half a time. It's 3.5 years. Okay, that's the way they call it. Time is a year, generally speaking, right? Who is this? Some say he's come before. There was a horrible guy who came out of the Roman Empire. His name is Antiochus Epiphanes. He was a Syrian general, right? Later I'll explain how he came about. And, right, he would be the one that will desecrate the temple. He's done it. That's this guy, Antiochus Epiphanes. He put a pig on the altar. He put prostitutes in every temple room. He put a statue of Zeus in the court, right? And he slaughtered 40,000 faithful Jews. This happened about 100 over BC, right? And he sold to slavery 40,000 other faithful Jews, like an antichrist. Is he the end? Is this talking about the next antichrist or the one that came, or is it both? I don't know. Many people say he was a foreshadowing of the antichrist. This guy I just mentioned speaks against God, changed the times. All right, he makes the laws. All right, so that was Daniel's dream. He was so troubled. Who's the lion? Who's the bear? Who's the leopard? No. People have different interpretations. All right, so Daniel's so troubled. And then Daniel has a second vision. This time is much easier to explain because God explains it. All right, in chapter 8, you read, Daniel sees now two. He's sitting there and sees by the river a ram with 2 horns. All right, remember I said Medo-Persian Empire. Medes first, then Persians. The Persians were more powerful. Second horn. Interpreted in chapter 8 when you read it. So it's interpreted. The ram is the Medo-Persian Empire. Then as he watched this ram, suddenly he saw a goat charging at top speed. Amazing speed. His feet were not as if on the ground, as if he was flying. And he slammed the ram, and the ram was helpless. Slammed down. And this goat went on in great power. And then while he was in his peak of power, he was over, kaput, gone. And 4 other little horns popped out. This goat had 1 horn, right? And that horn was snapped off, and 4 horns, tinier ones, smaller ones, came up in its place. And it's interpreted. It is the Greek Empire. Now, who was the Greek Empire? We know Alexander the Great. Every child knows that story. Alexander the Great came to power at speed nobody could believe. He was 32 when he conquered the world from India to Egypt. Right? He went on horseback at 32 years old. He had conquered the world. He was so fast in conquering that he didn't have time to consolidate. Right? That's why he was the empire of brass, strong brass, right? But not like the Babylonians who built this beautiful gold, glorious empire that everybody gaped at. Gold, right? The Medo-Persian was the silver. And the Greeks were the belly and the thigh, strength. And he conquered at top speed. 32 years old, he died. And his empire was split up into 4 kings. This is in the Bible, in history. Right? 4 generals took over. None of them liking each other. So it's all there in prophesied in Daniel chapter 8. These 4 generals, one ruled what we call Asia Minor, Turkey area. One general ruled Greece. One general ruled the Syrian part, Syria, right? The Babylonian, Syrian, that area. And the last one, Egypt. So in other words, Alexander's empire was split 4 ways, 4 generals. Now let's forget about the generals who ruled the Turkey area and the Greece area. They're out of the picture. Okay? Later, you'll find the guy, the general that ruled the Syrian empire, became stronger and stronger. He's called the King of the North. Later we'll see that in chapter 11. King of the North. King of the South is Egypt. Now why am I putting these two? I'll give you a bit of geography lesson, all right? Poor Israel was stuck between these two, Syria and Egypt, right? And the king of the north, the Syrian general, became stronger and stronger and was determined to conquer the king of the south. He did eventually. But Judah was in its way, so he had to smash through Judah. All right, because in case the loyalty of this guy in the middle doesn't know which side to go to. All right, so what we have here now is a king. One of the generals became kings, and then one of those kings, the little horn, became the monster horn that we read of, that he will declare himself to be God. He will sit in the temple. He will desecrate everything that the temple stood for. All right? And then, finally, all right, he will claim that he is God. Some say that's the Antichrist about to come. Some say it's Antiochus Epiphanes. Don't know. Maybe both. Okay? So that was in Daniel chapter 8. Okay? And so Daniel is so troubled by this. And something's going to happen one day that will trouble his beloved Jerusalem and the temple. And as he's troubled, he realizes that Jeremiah wrote a prophecy. And he checks it up and says, Jeremiah said we'll only be in exile for 70 years. And hey, this is in chapter 9. The 70 years is almost up. All right? And he starts to pray an amazing national prayer. He prays for Israel, asks forgiveness from God. God, we paid our penalty. We paid 70 years already almost. Time to go home, God, to be freed and our people can go back, right, from the exile. And then the angel Gabriel comes and tells him some bad news. Angel Gabriel said, 70 years, they continued to sin. 70 years. Let's stretch the punishment. Times it by 7. 70 times 7. All right? Now let's look back at chapter 9, verse 24 to 25. Okay? I'm trying to not trouble you with too many questionable interpretations of PC, but hopefully some of them are more acceptable, all right? So let's look at Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 and 25. 70 sevens are decreed. Okay, in the Bible, it is 70 weeks. A week is sevens, all right? So 70 sevens are decreed about your people and your holy city. So no more 70, 70 times 7 now. To finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. Verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem, to the coming of the anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. All right? Now, I hope you understand this, okay? He is saying it's no more 70. 70 times 7, 490. From the decree to go out, that means from the time they were told you can go back and build the temple, till the coming of the anointed one, till the coming of the prince, the Messiah, is 70 times 7. Right? That's how many? 490 years. If you look at the calendar, that's what time Christ came. Under 500 years. I mean, you cannot calculate exactly because there were 4 decrees to go back. 4 times they were told you can go back. Which decree is he calling for? He said, from the decree to go back till the coming of Christ, 70 times 7. Give and take a bit. Now to me, it's good enough. Can you imagine Christ coming? Time was given that in less than 500 years, he would come. First coming of Christ. He did. All right? Now to me, that's good enough. For my prophecy, all the other details, I don't need to know because it may speak of the second coming and I don't know nothing about the second coming. I can argue with, I can believe in this or that, and the lion is the US, UK, or whatever, I don't know. But I know something has already happened. From the going back to build the temple to the coming of Christ, less than 500 years, it happened. Good enough for me. All the details, I don't know. All right? So that's for me the prophecy I need, that if his first coming was predicted and he came, his second coming is predicted, he will come. That's good enough for me. When? I don't know. Who cares? He's coming. I'm sure. How do you know you're sure? Because when he predicted the first one, he came. And he predicted he'll come again. He'll come. But when? I don't know. All right? Because honestly, I don't think many scholars agree. Anyway, I always say prophecy, keep humble. Don't be too smart. Chapter 10. Chapter 9, that's good enough for me. Chapter 10. It tells us of a conflict. That things happening on earth, there is a parallel happening up in the heavens. As there's conflict on earth, there is angelic conflict, angelic and demonic conflict up there. We call it spiritual warfare. And a whole theology has been built about spiritual warfare. It's a new thing now. Very, very popular. Before people enter into a territory, because in chapter 10 it speaks of the prince of Persia, the prince, all right, the demonic prince of Persia, demonic prince of Greece, controlling these kingdoms, right? And then the angel Michael. Michael is the angel of Israel, in case you didn't know that. The guardian angel of Israel is Michael. Prince of the guardian angel of Greece, I don't know his name, but he's there. Of Persia, he's there. In other words, there are demonic forces up there. And the whole theology tells us now that before you enter a place to do evangelism, you go there first to bind the demonic forces. You go and pray against the demon so that your evangelism, your whatever you do can spread freely. While I know there are demonic forces up there, I'm never told to bind any of them. I'm never told, go ye therefore and bind the demonic forces and then make disciples. I never see that. In fact, when Jesus was on this earth, he didn't go around, attacking demons. He didn't. Until people came with demonic and said, my son is possessed with a demon, Jesus said, cast him out. All right? Whenever he was confronted, when there was a demonic thing in front of him, he dealt with it. He didn't go looking for demons to cast out. Honestly, the demons are everywhere. Everywhere. Right now, as I'm preaching to you, there are probably demonic beings running around trying to confuse my mind and mess up my computer. I'm pretty sure of that. But until they manifest themselves, it's like mosquitoes. When there's a mosquito, I kill it. All right? I don't spend my life going around looking for mosquitoes. Okay? So there's this whole new thing from chapter 10, Daniel chapter 10, of spiritual warfare. People who don't actually do anything except go around and binding the forces somewhere there or there. All right? And it gives you a sense of great power. After all, my goodness, I'm up in the heavens fighting the big demonic. I leave that to Michael, the archangel, etc. You know, the battles up there, God will take care of it. The battles down here is my responsibility. All right? So anyway, that's chapter 10. And then in chapter 11 is very hard to read. It speaks of all kinds of kings coming up here, there, and honestly, I don't know how to interpret that, but I just keep seeing king of the north, king of the south, king of the north, king of the south. I see that many times. So I see that kings in Syria, that part, you know, where the Alexander's generals had made a huge empire in Syria, another huge empire in Egypt, all right? And these two are vying for power, and poor Israel is stuck in the middle, right? And then again we see in Daniel 11, when you read it, you try to get the details, you go crazy, all right? Daniel 11 verse 31, all right? People will say, no, PC, you shouldn't say such things. I'm just being frank with you, all right? There are some things you just have to accept, that one day God will show it to you and say, got it, all right? But until that day comes, don't be too smart. Daniel 11 verse 31, talking about, you know, that evil man. All right, Daniel 11 verse 31. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. Is this Antiochus Epiphanes being predicted? Or is this Antichrist coming again to mess up the third temple? I don't know. Is this Antiochus Epiphanes messing up the second temple, or the Antichrist going to mess up the next temple that will one day maybe be built in Jerusalem? Right? I don't know. Maybe both. Right? Just I know that before the coming of Christ, there was a terrible guy, Antiochus Epiphanes. Before the coming of the second Christ's second coming, there'll be another one called not Antiochus, Antichrist. Fairly similar name, right? Anyway, finally we come to Daniel chapter 12, and I'm going to show you some verses probably never even struck you when you read it, but it's very critical. All right. In Daniel 12, verse 2, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Now you and I will say, that's resurrection. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? Why are you telling us about this? I'm telling you about this because Jews didn't understand this. It's a revelation to them. They knew when they died, they went to this dark place, Sheol, and they don't know what happens after that. You know, when Song of Solomon and people are talking about, you know, the good, the bad, they all go to the same place. You know, if you're a good man, you do your best. You're the bad man, you all go to the same place. As far as the Jews were concerned, that's their understanding. They went to this place and not quite sure what's going to happen next. But here it says, you, let's read it again, those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. You're going to get up from the dust. Resurrection. Right? And then we look at the last part of, the last verse of the Daniel chapter, verse 13, not the last verse, verse 13. Yes, it is the last verse, sorry. But go your way till the end. Last verse of the whole entire book. Daniel, just go your way. You shall rest. And shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. He's telling Daniel, don't be troubled by all these things. Kingdoms come, kingdoms go. You will go to the dust. One day you rise, you stand in your place. You will find your allotted place in that kingdom that I told you about. You know, the rock would come, smash the whole, this idol of Nebuchadnezzar, smash it down, and then an eternal kingdom will be built. Wow. That was the dream. Nebuchadnezzar saw this golden thing, and one day a rock carved from a mountain without hands smashes all that kingdoms, Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, Roman, all smashed. A new kingdom will come up. Everlasting kingdom. And you know what, Daniel? You will stand there. Wow. You know, I find people today so troubled by what's happening in this world. They really are troubled by politics. They get all involved and heated up about how the people rule, how their rulers are not doing right, and they feel like their whole life is engaged in fighting for a righteous kingdom. You know, I think Daniel was very troubled. He had served 4 kings. They were all terrible guys. He's very troubled. He saw the insides, and he saw the dirt and the junk. And God says to him, just read it, okay? Go your way till the end. Last verse. And you shall rest, and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. You know what the end of the days are, Daniel? I told you. The rock will come and smash every kingdom. That the beast that came out of the field, the lion, the bear, all look so fierce to you. You know what? One day, it's gone, Daniel. And you will take your allotted place in God's eternal kingdom. That's the book of Daniel. People worry about when, how he will come, all pre-trip, post-trip, all kinds of stuff. You know, he tells Daniel, relax. You'll be there. To you Christians who are so troubled by the world around you, you will be troubled. In this life you shall have struggles. In the sweat of your brow you will eat your bread. This is life on earth. There will joy in your heart, peace in your heart, especially if you know where you will go for eternity. What's the book of Daniel put here for? It's about kingdoms. It's not about you trying to be the next soothsayer and predicting exactly where the US will fit in, where England will fit in, where China will fit in into Daniel's prophecy. Waste your time. Worse still, Christian, waste your time trying to make righteous kingdoms on earth. Waste your time. Why didn't you just help people to find their allotted place in God's kingdom? Have peace on earth, because whatever happens now, I have a place allotted for me and I will stand there. Get it? I'm a citizen of the eternal kingdom. Is this how you read Daniel? Is this why Daniel is placed there? Or is it for curiosity so you can argue with somebody about what the Antichrist would look like, how many teeth he would have, or whatever? All right? It is about you just having peace, standing strong in the midst of all the turmoil of this world, still doing God's will as Daniel did, serving as best he could. What else could he do to change a corrupt king, etc.? Even as prime minister, he's trouble. He can't do much. What about you? Just be thankful that you will have a kingdom, and your job is to enroll as many into the citizenship of heaven. Not be troubled by the present or curious about when and how and all that. Know that you will be there. People ask me, are you pre-trib, post-trib, whatever, rapture? I said, you know what? I'll be there. I'll be there. For sure. That's all I need to know. I don't need to be troubled by the rest. I have a passport. I have a kingdom. And I'll be there. Now let me end by Daniel chapter 12 verse 9. For all the curious people, Daniel 12 verse 9. He said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. What does that say to you and me? You think you can be so smart? The words are shut up until the end of the time. When you get there, you'll look back and say, wow, all the predictions so perfect. Why didn't I see it? Because they were shut up, man. They were sealed until the end of the time, right? And here we go with all the brilliant scholars wasting their PhDs figuring out all the things they don't need. And our job is not to figure out these things. Our job is to make disciples of all nations. May God bless you with peace in the midst of troubled nations, that you may lead thousands of people into the eternal kingdom of God. That is the book of Daniel. That's why it is a wonderful part of the beautiful book. God bless you.